Is it picking up static when I talk?
No.
Can you hear that? No. So just
How about
it's
me?
random. It's not connected to the
Oh.
voices. It's just, it's saying, time to buy new mics.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. We might have to go with a room mic on this one, so.
That's fine.
Bill, you wore your expiring minds want to know shirt. I almost wore mine.
What is expiring?
That's funny.
And it was just
Expiring minds.
out of the box.
Right? That's funny.
How
And I didn't
funny.
think about it. We did a show, so Bill has been musical director for me for
Yeah.
many wonderful times. And a few not so wonderful times. You're welcome. But we did a show called Six Women with Brain Death. Expiring minds want to know, and it was just crazy, silly show.
It was just wildly weird.
I liked it. I like weird. Yep,
It's
it
fun.
was a great job, and it was a musical. So even if you didn't really like it, people love music. So then suddenly the music comes. They're like,
Right.
oh, good, there's a song. I don't know why that woman was just a head on a table, but here comes the song.
Right? And that is the enduring image. That and Lacey with her books.
Oh yeah,
God.
yeah. Stories about women, all
Oh,
pieced
that'd be
together.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Very
it's really a fun
fascinating.
You
piece.
knew
Yeah.
the knew some of them, those women?
In Sacramento, so did I.
No, before that, when they were in Colorado.
What?
Yeah.
See how we all live so circular? Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll do the slate again, Jill, and then so just name, birthday, and where you were born. I love that, where you were born. Okay, action.
My name is Jill Konechny Elliott. I go by Jill, and I was born in Inglewood, California on March 21st, 1974.
Thank you. Excellent. So I have a series of questions, and I'd rather it be a conversation so that you don't feel like you're on the spot with having to answer a question on a form.
Okay,
This is really about you and getting to know who you are.
great.
So I want to know about your family first. So you're born in Inglewood, California. That sounds lovely. 75. 70s were a good year. 70s were.
I think so.
Yeah, good year. So your parents. So who are your parents?
My parents are Neil and Caroline Konechny. My dad was an electrical engineer for when we moved out here for Bentley, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the third, and I have an older brother, an older sister, and a younger sister.
And how old were you when you moved to Gardnerville?
3.
You were 3 years old. So do you remember that move at all?
I remember staying at the Ormsby house
Oh, awesome. That's great.
and swimming in their pool.
And so then did you live in Carson or Gardnerville?
We live in Carson Valley, Jacks Valley specifically.
And have you stayed living in Jacks Valley, Carson Valley since then?
I lived in Carson Valley until I was 18. Then I went to school in Southern California for 5 years. I was a super senior, graduated in 97 with a nursing degree. And then I moved back to Reno for about a year and a half. And then I moved back to Southern California, San Diego. And after that, I traveled as a nurse for a couple years.
Oh, that's great.
And then I moved back to the area when I was in my 30s, late 20s, early 30s.
It's a traveling nurse. That's great. So one of my questions in there was, when you were a kid, what was your dream? What was your dream job that you wanted to do or to be?
My dream job was going to be a veterinarian to work with animals. I really appreciated like monkeys specifically, and like large cats, tigers and cheetahs and whatnot. But after finding out that the veterinarians had to be in school for as long as they did, I opted into the nursing program, and people kind of became more of a priority to me to help people. So my dream job was to kind of travel as a nurse. I wanted to work like on a hospital ship and work in different countries and things like that.
So as part of NAMI, you have been diagnosed. What is your diagnosis?
My diagnosis is schizophrenia and major depression.
And what age were you when you started to feel like there might be something going on?
So when I first moved away to college is when I had my first problems with mental illness. I think up until that point I was stable. I grew up in a nuclear home, and I felt like I gained a sense of stability. But when I moved away to college, I started having issues with depression and eventually psychosis. So I had my first episode of psychosis when I was probably 20. I became very suicidal. I was disconnected from friends. I was staying up all night studying. I couldn't trust people. I felt like the TV was giving me special messages, and people were out to get me. And I was not in a good state. Again, I was suicidal at the time. And so I went to the school counselor, and she said it would be a good idea to check myself into a facility, a mental health hospital. And so I did that because I just didn't feel well. I was very depressed, and I was put on medications at that time, antipsychotic and antidepressant medications, and I did a little bit of therapy and followed up with the school clinic. And so that was my first episode of psychosis, was in my 20s.
And were you studying medicine at the time?
I was studying nursing at the time.
So was it something that when it started to come up that you could understand a little bit about?
I felt like there was something wrong with my head, but I thought it was something physical. I thought I needed an MRI at the time. When I was going through my psychiatric nursing books, I would kind of relate or feel like there was something wrong with me, but I was really afraid of something being wrong, like in a kind of chemical or a mental health way. I had a lot of fears about that.
So when you say schizophrenia, and when somebody first said to you that, we're going to diagnose you with schizophrenia, what did that mean to you? If you're a schizophrenic, then for me, sometimes I'll feel or think schizophrenia, then that person might have dual personalities, or schizophrenia can sound extreme when you hear that on the outside. So when you first heard that diagnosis, what did you hear? What did that mean to you as a person? I
didn't believe it. So I was one that I would continue to go to like my doctor and my therapist, and they would say, I had the label of schizophrenia or schizoaffective at one point, and I didn't believe it, but I knew that the medicines and the treatments I was taking with the psychotherapy were helping me, and it was helping me reach my goals. And so I didn't really buy into the diagnosis. So I think I was really scared that there was something mentally wrong with me, but at the same time I could see that the treatment was helping me. And it was, it made me feel less depressed, certainly, which was not a great state to be in. And it kind of helped clarify things. But I didn't really believe the diagnosis for a long time, probably like 10 years.
Do you now?
I do. It doesn't bother me. It's just, to me, having schizophrenia and major depression, it's just like any other illness. It's just not visible, and I don't feel the stigma so much of having a mental illness, and a lot of that's because I've met other people through NAMI that has helped me gain strength and helped me kind of release that. I had a lot of barriers within myself, and I had to overcome a lot of stigma within myself. And I know there's stigma out there with others. I've experienced that with other professions and like licensing agencies. But I think the biggest stigma I had to overcome was just the fears within myself.
Right. How does schizophrenia present itself?
For me, like the symptoms is I feel like my brain is like in a loop. It's really difficult to focus. And so it takes a lot of intention to focus on activities. So it can be physically exhausting because there's a lot going on in my mind.
Is there extreme behavior that comes with that?
There's positive symptoms of schizophrenia and there's negative symptoms of schizophrenia. I've always suffered more from the negative symptoms, which is like feeling down in the dumps, depressed, the positive symptoms obviously are like hallucinations or hearing voices. I've only experienced that very slightly before I've gotten treatment that has helped me alleviate those things. So yeah, like I guess my symptoms are more the negative symptoms.
Is your family a support system for you?
Absolutely. I have a strong, supportive family that's been very helpful, but I think for a long time they didn't know what to do about my mental illness or how to help me. I think they did the best that they could, and I think what I would say for family members out there, sometimes just helping out in practical ways, like giving somebody a place to stay or giving them clothes when they're in the hospital, or just helping out in practical ways and just not giving up on them can be a very helpful thing.
It sounds like you've had a pretty voracious career, which is wonderful. With any kind of illness, it can get in the way of what we want to do, right?
Right.
Whether it's physical, and again, what I'm hearing from both of you is that mental illness is sometimes confined in people's mind to just something in your head, but it really is all physical.
Right.
It's the whole body.
Right.
So I'm curious if that illness then got in the way of you being able to pursue your career.
It has limited me. And I developed really bad postpartum depression with psychosis after my second child, and I ended up incarcerated because of it, because my ex-husband pressed charges. So because I have like domestic violence on my record, it's been hard to overcome licensing agencies in Nevada. There was always the laws, the HIPAA laws that prevent people's medical histories from leaking out into the workforce. But once you are in the legal system, those protections aren't there. So I tried to, after that happened, I tried to get a license to sell insurance to kind of test the waters, because I didn't feel ready to go back into nursing, just to sell life insurance. And I was just meeting a lot of barriers where the state was not going to allow me to just even sell insurance to people. And I took that as a sign, well, if they're not going to let me sell insurance, they're certainly probably not going to let me go back into nursing. And so I eventually found NAMI, and I was working I got a job at Marshall's, the department store, through the Department of Vocational Rehab for a while, but that really wasn't my thing. But I stayed with it because I have to pay child support, and so eventually I got a job peer supporting with NAMI after volunteering for a number of years.
That's great. I want to go back to the relationship, if you're comfortable with that. So how old were you when you got married?
I was, it was 2005, so I would have been 30.
And so you'd had your diagnosis.
Right.
Had you had relationships prior to that?
Right, I had boyfriends before then.
And did you feel like sometimes your diagnosis would get in the way of those relationships?
Yeah, I was always very emotionally volatile, I felt, almost like moody. And I was at that, in my 20s, it wasn't until my late 20s that things kind of came to head and I had to go back into treatment. When I was in my early 20s, when I was first diagnosed, I just needed treatment for a year and I was kind of able to go on my way. But then after working night shifts and traveling and the stress of being a nurse, it took its toll on me and I started to develop psychosis again. And so I was hospitalized and put on medications, and so it did interfere with my relationships, because part of it was not having treatment, but even once I did receive treatment, if I was undergoing any kind of psychosis symptoms because of maybe working a night shift and getting my sleep cycle messed up, I would become very paranoid. So my schizophrenia is paranoid schizophrenia, where I get I mistrust and have a hard time distinguishing reality because I don't feel like I can trust those that I should be able to.
So when you got involved with your husband, before he was your husband, was he aware of what you were going through?
Yes, he was.
And so, and then you had children.
Mm-hmm.
How many kids do you have?
We have two boys together. We co-parent them now.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, was there an event that came up that that then made it so that you decided to separate and that he kept the kids for a while?
Yeah, so he is a firefighter, and so he travels a lot in the summer for his job. And so we kind of, our family was planned. We planned to have the kids. Some people, I guess, just have them, but it was actually a planned thing because I had to work with my psychiatrist to develop a plan for medications and things that would be safe for the baby and for myself. And so he was away, and what I didn't plan on was that the pregnancy and raising a toddler would take its toll on me as much as it was. And so he had gone away, and I had my older son who was a toddler and the baby who was 10 months old. And he came home, and he was immediately, within like 10 minutes, going to have to leave again. And that's when we had an altercation. And he just kind of at that point was done, and we kind of separated at that point.
Then after that, did he use your diagnosis against you, or?
Unfortunately, yes. When in going through the divorce and with the finding custody of the children, it was used against me, unfortunately.
And so now you co-parent.
Yes.
So what were some of the tools or the ways that you were able to then get to a point that you could co-parent with him?
Yeah, so it's interesting how life takes its turns. And I've gone through anger management, so I know how to deal with my feelings and how to, that I can't control other people's responses towards me or other people's actions, but I have full control and full responsibility towards how I can react. And so that puts me in a power position. Also, he's remarried now, and his new wife, their kid's stepmom, is phenomenal, and we are actually friendly towards each other, and we're able to have a good relationship towards each other. And we've, as terms of my ex-husband and we've put our differences aside and just decided we're going to make the best that we can and raise these kids together. And I've taken co-parenting classes where it's not okay to badmouth the other parent in front of the kids, but you just have to focus on making letting the kids have a good life.
That's wonderful.
So it's a challenge. It takes
is.
a lot of maturity, but it's been better for my health, I can say. It certainly wasn't my dream to be a co-parent. I wanted that nuclear family that I had growing up, but I can't say things haven't worked out the way they should have worked. It was different than my ideal, but I feel very blessed to have children, and certainly that they're being well cared for.
So has it affected your relationship with your children? How old are they now?
They are 11, and the youngest is going to be 9. So I'm probably more of a playmate than a mom. They call me Jill often as opposed to mom, and that's kind of hard, but I get to kind of spoil them. So whereas sometimes kids have their grandparents that can spoil them, my kids get spoiled by myself. So they come over and we play games together. We do fun things. We go to the pool. We go on like nature hikes. They get a different level of specialness and care at my house because it's just a unique thing. So I'm not as much of a mom as I am kind of like a special parent, but it's worked out It's worked out well. So it has changed my relationship with them. I do kind of get jealous sometimes that they don't call me mom all the time, but it's just calling me by my name is not derogatory in any way.
Right.
So why should I take that as an offense?
Yeah, and you're having the opportunity to get to know them.
Absolutely. I still can be a part of their life. It's just in a different way than I would have thought.
Initially, when that happened, that must have been really, really hard.
Yes.
And I get that. Separation is very difficult from your kids, and then figuring out who you are with them can be this beautiful thing that we all of a sudden. But when that happened, did that affect you in a deeper way? Or were you in treatment at that time, so you were able to get through that hurdle? How did that work?
So I had to go through mental health court, and I actually was separated. I had no contact with him. It was over a year. It was really hard because I had a baby who was 10 months old and a toddler, but just I wasn't stable enough and the courts didn't want me around them. So I had to focus on myself, which was hard because I think sometimes as women, we want to be caregivers, we want to give it our all, we want to give ourselves to others. At least that's how I was wanting to be, and I kind of lost myself in that. And so I had to focus on myself, my health, and it made me reestablish my priorities. One thing I will say, it's interesting to see life through the eyes of kids. We had to start out through supervised visitation at the Ron Wood Center, and they actually loved it so much that at one point when we were done with supervised visitation and I was just visiting with them regularly, they were like, why don't we get to go to that place anymore? I'm like, what, you want to go to supervised visitation again? And they're like, yeah, that was fun. So it's interesting they weren't traumatized. I was traumatized. And so knowing that it didn't harm them, I can adult up and kind of make the best of the situation.
Right. Is schizophrenia something that is passed in a family?
It can be genetic. I don't know all the statistics on that, but schizophrenia only affects 1% of the population. It doesn't discriminate with race or gender or ethnicity, socioeconomic. It's 1% of the population, and you'll find it in all different groups and sectors and but it is rare, and there is a genetic component. So my children are they might have mental illness. Well, I do have one that does have mental illness, but I don't think it's the end of the world to have schizophrenia. I say to people, it may slow me down, but it doesn't stop me. I've been able to accomplish a master's degree in business with a 4.0 in 1 year. That's one of my feathers in my cap. But at the same time, I think yeah, sure, it slows me down, but I think when people think of schizophrenia, they think of like somebody homeless on the street, and sure, maybe that person does have schizophrenia, but it's not a death sentence. You can still have a great life and have a mental illness like schizophrenia.
So there's a diagnosis, and there's also labels. Sometimes people will label you. What labels have you felt that have been put on you in your adulthood?
Right.
Because you've had a big experience with this. What are some of those labels?
Well, of course, like crazy and psycho. Those are schizophrenic. Those are labels I don't like to hear. Right. I think I try not to let that bother me. I try to put on a good show in terms of like my appearance so that I don't look like I'm crazy, but it's an invisible illness, and so I think that's what I want people to know, is that mental illness is an invisible illness. You can't see the distress somebody might be going through necessarily.
Right. So you had a huge shift in your life, and one of the questions actually NAMI wanted to be included in this, which I think is really important, is have you been able to get safe access to housing and resources?
So yes, I've had access to what I need, but it hasn't always been in a way that I feel is dignified. And that's because of when sometimes health situations or a mental health situation intersects with the law, there's like incarceration there involved, and I don't feel that that's a dignified way to be able to get treatment. Unfortunately, it's a direction that my life has taken a turn. Some of it was an insurance issue because going through a divorce, I didn't have funds and I couldn't afford insurance, and it got dropped. And there's that interim period when you're trying to get disability or Medicaid or whatever, and you're kind of in limbo. So I spent a period of 8 months in jail, not all at one time. It was like 3 months here, 2 months there, maybe 1 week stay there, where they would be adjusting my medications. And I think that that's not a great way. Putting those officers as like in the position of healthcare providers isn't fair. It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to the person that is receiving those services. So I've always had what I needed. In terms of housing, I have family and friends, so I can always couch surf. So I've never been homeless on the street. I'm very thankful for that. I have an ability to get along with people enough that they'll take me in for a period of time. But I think the medication piece and making people in law enforcement be healthcare providers is not a good way to go. I don't think law enforcement should be an answer to any kind of healthcare problem, and mental illness is a healthcare problem, and it can be a healthcare emergency. So that would be my answer to that.
When you were released, did you have the ability to go to a safe place, or did you have to keep rebuilding each time?
So when I was released, I was living with my parents. So my dad would pick me up from the jail and take me to their house. So I didn't have to rebuild the housing piece of it. I was able to get treatment on the outside with the mental health clinic. So I had providers there, and that was fine. But like I said, I don't know, rebuilding, I've had to rebuild. I feel like my mental health situation has kind of slowed me down in terms of maybe career-wise, but it's okay. I have a lot of experience now in terms of what I can give back as a peer supporter. So yeah, I've had to rebuild. Anytime you go through something traumatic like that, there's a rebuilding process, but that's just part of life. And I can't say anything negative about my experiences other than, well, I don't know. I can't really say anything negative. That's just the life's journey I was meant to go on and the lessons I've had to learn, and that's okay.
If you were to look back at your college self the first time that you were started to experience some of these things, what advice would you give her?
I think in my college self, I wish I would have been more trusting of healthcare providers and of like groups like NAMI. I didn't even know about NAMI until 5 years ago, which is kind of surprising because I was in the healthcare field, but I was always taking care of, like, I was in critical care, so I was like taking care of small babies or people getting out of surgery. So I would have tried to prompt my college self to say, hey, don't let things get as bad as they sometimes did, because I was in not a good place mentally many times. I would be suicidal, and I just kind of just powered through it as best as I could until I had to go back to the hospital and get put on everything. But I think I would have tried to tell my young self to seek out other people with mental illness, because they provide experiences and stories that one can learn from, and there's strength there and wisdom there, and kind of almost like a shelter there too. And it helps with feeling normal.
So that you have a community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you ever, a lot of people when they're experiencing things that are out of the norm or make them feel different, self-medicate? Did you ever have a problem with that?
Well, I would say probably yes. I had experienced really difficulties with sleeping. So I wanted to be put on a medication for sleep, and my doctor was reluctant because he had given it to me for the hospital stays because that was kind of stressful. But he did wind up allowing me to be on that medication. Unfortunately, it was habit forming, so I was on it for like 3.5 years. If I didn't take it, I would not sleep all night. So I was eventually able to get off of it after I had kids and things kind of leveled out. So that was something that was hard. It was hard to be dependent on a medication for something as simple as sleep. And the other thing, like, I think I ignored the warnings on as many people do, on the drug and alcohol, on the drug bottles that say don't mix with alcohol. And so I would enjoy wine, and I had to, after my mental health or during my mental health court program, they don't allow you to do that. So I have been abstinent from like alcohol since then, and I think that's a good way to go because it's just, you kind of have to pick and choose. Are you going to choose your mental health, or are you going to choose, trying to self-medicate? And I've had the benefit of going through a lot of psychotherapy and intensive outpatient therapies, and I've learned skills to deal with a lot of things that would have troubled me in the past. And so now I can rely on those skills, and I don't have to rely on like alcohol.
Good. So sometimes people give us skills and advice,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we go to the doctor, they give us this list. You're a very smart woman, and you also have practiced nursing and care.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any advice that you could give somebody who is given this list? Here's your tools. Now, how do you implement those tools? Because you seem to have done that.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
So I like to tell people some of my self-care tools are: you never want to get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. It's HALT. It's an acronym. So that's some of my self-care tools. Make yourself a priority. Make your health and your wellness a priority. Also, I practice mindfulness. So just learning to be present and to have gratitude in the moment. Helps me with positivity, because I think I was negatively slighted before, and that had a lot to do with me becoming suicidal, was because my thinking, I had stinking thinking, is what one therapist said. I was just slighted towards the negative, and I had to learn, if I can find one thing to be grateful for, if I found one thing, it would change the way I thought, and it could change the way I felt. So I was actually able to combat my depression with just changing the way I thought, and that was like mind-blowing to me, that I could just change my thoughts and it would change my mood, and I wouldn't feel like this dark cloud was over me. So those are a few of the skills that I've learned.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's very good. We hear the word success a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a couple components to this question. I think it's interesting to understand what defines success for us as a person. So that would be my first question on that word. What defines success for you?
That's interesting. I think before my mental health court program, I think success was largely exterior stuff, like my career, my family, things like that, things that other people could see tangibly.
Mm-hmm.
Now my success is more internal. I feel successful if I can help somebody else out, if I am able to give back. That's success. And I feel success just finding the silver lining in the day, or finding a purpose in the day. I think my success is now, it's much more of an internal thing that I strive for, as opposed to like exterior things. Trying to find balance and just gratitude again. I'm huge on gratitude, because like I said, by changing the way I thought, I was able to change the way I felt. And that's changed my perspective on life.
It's beautiful. You answered both those questions.
Okay.
As a child, what career or what success did you see for yourself when you were a kid? What did you want to be?
I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Right,
I
you said.
wanted to help people. I wanted to travel. I think travel, anything like with a beach and like a little pina colada with a little umbrella in it, it was like, that would be success to me. So
It's interesting to hear both of those together from both you and Megan, because from the outside, especially because you've both had to deal with things internally, you've had, in a way, epiphanies, that you've reached some pinnacles that I think were set up for you at a younger age, which is interesting. Do you still have a relationship with your siblings?
yeah, we don't have a real super close relationship, but we've never had a strained relationship. So I think we've always been not close in proximity, but close as we're there for each other when we need to be. My brother lives in Sacramento. One of my sisters lives in Nogales, Mexico, and my other sister lives in Washington, D.C. So we're not close, and we don't talk on the phone a lot, but we're there for each other. And so I feel like a sense of closeness for them, towards them.
Mm-hmm. Are they part of your support network?
In some ways, yeah.
What would be your immediate support network?
My boyfriend would be one of the top ones. My peers, my NAMI group of peers that I've come across, my friends in NAMI, those are big supporters. My parents, because they live close by. So I think those are people that are actually living in closer proximity to me, that I see more on a daily basis.
And so you're currently medicated, is that correct?
Yeah, I take an antipsychotic and an antidepressant.
And has that taken a while for you to be able to find I use that word with Megan too, the correct cocktail of how that works?
Yeah, and unfortunately it has changed over time, and that was part of the problem going through my mental health program through the courts, was that I was going through a lot of hormonal changes, and what had worked for me in the past wasn't working, and it actually had a detrimental side effect where I had to be taken off one of them because it was slowing down my heart rate. So yeah, unfortunately, there are those times, and people's body chemistry changes, and what has worked for so long might stop working, and so it does take time. I think when I first got into the first couple times I got into treatment, I would start feeling better fairly quickly. But as I've gotten older, it's a little bit more difficult to find the right balance. But I have better coping skills now. I have a stronger support system now. I'm more forgiving of myself, less perfectionistic. So I have that to my benefit.
And access to the health care and to the medications that you need, is that a challenge? How does that work?
It can be, because I have Medicare, so it's Part D, so they cover prescriptions, but if it's a brand name drug, anything that's newly released, it's going to be super expensive. So I tend to tell my providers, try to find something generic. Otherwise, it's going to be hundreds of dollars, and I don't have that. It's just weird the way that is, but fortunately, I've been able to find a good balance of treatment, and there's some treatments that I've tried that I'm glad I didn't fall in love with because they were very expensive, that were supposed to be better treatments, but I look at things work out the way they're supposed to work out, but it can be frustrating when you think there could be a better treatment out there. I can't afford it, even though I've got insurance. It's weird.
How often do you see a doctor and maintain with your different medications and with your treatment and with counseling?
So the counseling piece, I'm actually on hiatus right now. So I'm thankful for that. Like I said, I've been through like decades of psychotherapies and different kinds of groups, but my peer support is huge. And so that has given me enough support where I don't need a therapist right now, and I'm told that that's okay. I'm open to going back if I have some kind of stressor. So that piece I don't need, but I definitely need the medication piece still. So I see I had a psychiatrist and he took another job, so I have a nurse practitioner, psychiatric nurse practitioner who I see via telehealth at the state clinic, and I see her every 2 to 3 months. Usually it's every 3 months, but sometimes we adjust it. And I've been on a pretty stable regimen of meds. It hasn't really changed that much, so that part is pretty easy. But in terms of other things that the meds do, they do have side effects. I mean, I'm thankful for the meds. There's better living by chemistry, I say. But I've gained at least 30 pounds. I'm starting to have pre-diabetes and high cholesterol. And right now, I'm told that with just lifestyle changes, I should be able to change that up a little bit. So like getting 10,000 steps a day, which is hard, but I have to be intentional, and I'm trying to get that in, and then just cutting back serving sizes and cutting back sugars and stuff like that should help the pre-diabetes. So I see a primary care physician, and that's usually once a year, but unfortunately with the metabolic syndrome that's creeping up as a result of the medications, I've been seeing her every 3 months.
So we're at NAMI, and it's I think an incredible organization that I only know a little bit about. So you said you just learned about NAMI 5 years ago, and we know that Nevada is 51st in the state of mental illness. So what first brought you to NAMI?
I was looking for additional supports as I was wrapping up my mental health court program and graduating from there. I was looking for supportive groups, and I found just a wonderful group of peers. And so it was a flyer in the mental health clinic, the state mental health clinic, that there was a NAMI support group. And so that's how I reached out. And it took me a while to catch on. Like they were reaching out to me like via like an email or whatever, a lot more than I was catching on, but eventually I did catch on, and I'm thankful that I have because there's advocacy, education, and support here, and I found all three to be very valuable and helpful.
What kind of support groups does NAMI offer?
They offer a family support group, so that's the twice, they do those different times, and then there's peer support groups.
And so when you say peer support group, what does that entail?
That means somebody who's had a personal experience with mental illness. They don't necessarily have to be diagnosed or on medication. It could have been a temporary thing, or maybe they're considering needing to go on medication or to see a doctor, or they can be diagnosed and whatever. So peer support groups mean it's co-led by people trained who have recovery experience in mental illness, and we use group wisdom to help each other solve problems.
And how often would you meet?
We meet in Carson City once a week, and they have these groups all over. There's one in Silver Springs, Elko. In terms of family support, there's Carson City, there's Winnemucca.
And so through coming to NAMI, then you started to work for them, right? Is that, I'm correct in that?
Yeah.
So do you volunteer, or do you actually work? Are you employed by them?
So I started out as a NAMI volunteer. It wasn't my dream to work for NAMI. It just kind of happened. I volunteered as a peer support leader for a couple years, and I took a lot of the NAMI education as part of it. So there's peer-to-peer groups, which it teaches you about your illness. There's family support, or some kind of a family group where it teaches about family members with mental illness. There's basics, which I'm a basics teacher as well, that teaches about kids with mental illness. And so I was a volunteer for probably 2 years, and a position opened up, and I thought about it, but I wasn't like, oh yeah, let's do this. And then eventually I decided, yeah, I think I want to give this a try, and it's kind of grown from there. So I do some volunteering with NAMI because there's certain functions that NAMI only uses volunteers for. They don't use paid staff for, like the peer support groups. But I am I'll be a NAMI employee in October. We're independent contractors right now.
That's great. And do you feel like you're using some of the things that you had learned in your nursing and bringing it sort of full circle with NAMI?
Yeah, I do, but I think peer support is more based on mutuality, and there's a lot of like clinical relationships and professional relationships where you have to have really strong boundaries. And here, it's okay to explore like friendships and healthy relationships, and it's a different type of relationship than it would be as if I was a nurse, somebody's nurse.
Right. One of the things that kind of came up, I heard the other day on NPR that in London now, because there's so much loneliness,
Yeah.
that they have appointed a minister of loneliness. This is a job title.
Wow.
And do you find in mental health that there's a lot of loneliness?
Yes, I think the nature of mental illness is to isolate a lot of times, and I think that, yeah, I think there is. I felt very lonely and not in tune with. There was a part of me for the longest time, for over a decade, that I didn't want to share with people because I was ashamed of it. And then when you realize there's so many people that have similar experiences, it's really eye-opening and it can be very empowering.
How do you walk in the door of NAMI? So say, all right, so say somebody has some of these different things that are revealing themselves and feeling alone and isolated. What advice could you give to somebody to actually walk in the door of NAMI or a similar place to get that help? How do you do that?
Well, for me, unfortunately, I would let things get to crisis level. Maybe it was that critical care nurse in me. You have to be almost dying before you can get help. So I always entered the healthcare system for my mental health through the ER. That's how I would enter it. All it takes is coming in and coming to the group. And like I said, it's a judgment-free zone. It's confidential. It's meant to be a safe space. And you can be experiencing any level of mental distress or maybe have questions, and you don't necessarily even have to be in treatment, but we're here to be supports for people. So I guess that's the unique thing about it, is everybody's at a different place in their journey, and we're here to support and to help that.
I think one of the really empowering things too that's coming out of both you and Megan is the fact that you guys have been able to communicate your challenges, your struggles, in order to help other people. And that's amazing and a really beautiful thing that you're getting behind that, that you have the tools to be able to do that. If you're able to look down the road, if you're able to think, where could this go in 10 years? Of anything that you would like to fill in, whether it's working with teenagers or having an impact somewhere. Do any of those things come up for you?
Yeah, I think I would like to see in time more peer supporters in this area. It's a field that is used all throughout the world, but it's not real strong here in Northern Nevada, peer support, and I would love to be able to be like in charge of peer supporters, like be a supervisor or a resource for other people that are on their journey that want to give back. So I would love to be in more of a leadership role as a peer supporter.
You mentioned also that you do some art classes.
Mm-hmm.
I love art. I think art can bring out different things for people, but also help solve problems, help connect. What are some of the art projects and pieces that you're doing with this group?
The latest that we've been working on are gratitude pumpkins. So they're like a plastic pumpkin that we're designing, putting different designs on, and you can write things you're grateful for, or you can just put a design on it, or things that remind you of fall. But I think more importantly, it's become a space where people that are maybe intimidated to go to a support group and just rely on talking or listening or whatever, they can come in and focus on a project, and then they can build trust with the other people, and hopefully that will segue into stronger relationships, less social anxiety or anxieties to going to a support group. Because even at the support groups, it's not mandatory to share anything. You could come in and just listen. So yeah, the art it's great. It's a great way to kind of build a sense of trust and a sense of community. You can work on something, and sometimes people just come in and hang out and don't just want a place to be for a while.
You mentioned gratitude quite a bit, and you're obviously practicing gratitude.
Yeah.
What are a few of the things that you're grateful for right now?
I'm grateful. I feel like I'm a cat. I have had 9 lives because I've kind of pushed the edge of maybe my limitations, and maybe I'm on life 7 right now as a cat, but I'm thankful for my life. I'm thankful that I have opportunity to give back. I'm thankful for my children. I'm thankful that I have a relationship with them, as unique as it is. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful for the beautiful state of Northern Nevada. I'm thankful for the changing seasons. I'm thankful for my boyfriend and his mother that lives with us. There's a lot I'm thankful for. So I'm thankful for my growth, for my journey. Even the things that have been hard, it's given me a kind of a platform to say, hey, I've been there, and if I haven't, I'm here to listen because I'm really interested in your experience. So
Right.
I'm thankful for all those things.
Megan mentioned she has that beautiful tattoo of the Don Quixote book. I'm curious if you have a story or a book that is something that is your favorite, that that is a go-to for you. Could be a child story, it could be a book that you read. I have a darker favorite book, which is The Handmaid's Tale. I love Margaret Atwood as a writer, and when I read her stories, it pulls me into this world. I love her mind, and I didn't know if you had a writer or a book like that.
I don't think I have a source of inspiration quite like that. I believe in God, so I feel like there's purpose in that. And but you talk about a book, I just keep going back to one of my childhood favorites was Be Nice to Spiders. Maybe that's the humanitarian in me, but it's a book that has always kind of stuck with me.
And also leads into the veterinarian and
Yes.
taking care of other people.
Right.
Do you miss being a nurse?
I do at times. I do miss that. I enjoyed it. It was definitely for a time and a place in my life, and I'm open to going back if the opportunity arises. But like I was telling you before, being on disability and working, I feel like I'm in a position of power where I can choose and not feel like I have to have this job and sacrifice myself to make ends meet. I feel like I'm very blessed and I have a full cup to pour from, whereas sometimes I would feel burnt out and stressed out, and I don't feel like that happens as much, so I'm very thankful for that. And I know that disability is more of an entitlement program, and I don't feel that way. I feel like I get it it's a blessing. It's a grace thing, something I didn't really deserve, but it's kind of like it's given me a second chance, and I don't know that people understand or hear that side of it. Maybe they have misconceptions about people that are disabled or on disability because of whatever illness they're going through, but it's given me a second chance.
Right, and you're very active. You are part of the community and giving back. And so that is a very interesting component with that, because I think they'll put a label on,
Right.
and so
Right.
they see disability as something where then you can then sit on the couch. And,
Right.
and you're not sitting on the couch.
Hardly ever.
No. So Megan did also talk about the difficulty for some people in order to go down to Social Security and get disability. Was that a difficult process for you, or did you come from the other side of that?
It was tough because when I was going through my pregnancy of my second child, I knew something was really wrong, and I knew I was going to need some help. So at that point, I had applied to disability, and I had quit my job, and I couldn't follow through. I was just way too ill, and it wasn't until probably like three or 4 years later, I had graduated with my MBA, and I was still having trouble getting back into the workforce. And so I took the job at Marshall's, and I was like, this is really odd. I was always able to, work myself out of my situation, but at this time I wasn't. So I wound up hiring an attorney, and they helped me follow through on it. And the Social Security backdated everything to that date of that original application. I wasn't able to get compensated because it went too far back, but I was able to get, help at that point. But it's not an easy process, especially for somebody that's not feeling well. So to have somebody help you with it, it was very helpful. It's just, I didn't have to go through appeals or go to court. I think they saw my records and what I had been through, and that was enough. It kind of spoke for itself. But since I do work, I have tons of audits. It's a kind of a pain in the butt, but it's just part of what goes along with it. So like I have to submit like financial audits with paychecks and medical audits, just that I'm still not able to work in a capacity that would put me over the poverty line. So there's a lot that goes into working on disability. I'm thankful for it, but it is it's its own, it's not for the faint of heart.
Right. There's things in life for each one of us that stimulate us, like we were talking about books before, but you do the art with the folks here on the outside. So if you got to choose something that would be like the ultimate day date just for you, or evening date, whether it's going to the symphony or the ballet, is there something that really soothes your soul that is outside of all of this that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I enjoy, I go to the Brewery Art Center sometimes with my mom, and we do Zentangle classes with our teacher Audrey, and she's just wonderful. It's a great time to spend with my mom, and it also is very mindful and meditative. It's kind of like doodling, but it's like an abstract art form, and it's really fun, so it's something I enjoy.
And do you do that at home as well after doing
Sometimes.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I have a question in terms of as children. So you have children. What advice would you give to parents that might be starting to see some things in their children that could be schizophrenic or things that are happening? What could that parent do to reach out and then create a safe space for their children?
Yeah, so that's been hard because I do have a son that has mental illness. He has ADHD, and he's got a small traumatic brain injury, and he's got a learning disability on top of that, and some behavioral problems. Sounds horrible, but he's just such a cute kid. He's a lot of fun, and he's got a great personality, but we've had to really advocate for him, and we went into the school district saying, he's not just your typical average little boy, he's going to need some extra help. And they kept saying, oh, he's just a little boy, he'll outgrow it. And so it took a number of years and a number of testing and a lot of money and a lot of just advocating on our part to get him an IEP in place. But now that he has that, it's making a world of difference. He's staying at grade level. He's in the classroom most of the time with just a little bit of extra accommodation. But for parents, I would say don't give up on your kids. I worked with a lot of parents as a nurse, and you're the eyes and the ears of your children, and you can have such an incredible ability to advocate for them. And if you sense something's wrong, keep going back, get those second opinions, be kind of a pain in the butt if you have to be, because those kids can't fight for themselves. They're just kids.
Right. And I think resources are hard. I mean, as kids get older, some kids are dealing with some anger issues, and parents, especially if you're a single parent,
Right.
you might have a sense of fear of, I had that come up, of I'm scared for my child, but also scared of my child. And you don't want to necessarily put them in the system, right? So you don't want to just call juvenile probation.
Right.
Does NAMI offer anything like that? If you're a parent, for example, like through any of these group meetings?
So they offer family support group, and they offer a course called Family to Family, which is more for towards teenagers and adults. It's an educational course. And then there's the basics, NAMI basics course, which is the one that's for younger kids. So it's also educational. We don't really do kids per se, meaning we don't offer the one-on-one support groups or anything for the kids. It becomes a liability. But we have educational programs, and we have support groups for the parents.
Okay. As a parent, have you ever experienced a fear of not being able to provide what you need to for that child?
I wonder, if if providing for that child is gonna overextend me, because we've had to get the type of treatment we really found most beneficial. We've had to go out of the state for a psychiatrist for him. We're working with a pediatric psychiatrist, but for the level of care he needed a medication that she didn't want to prescribe. So we went to the Amen Clinic in California and did brain scans, and he's got a great psychiatrist now. He's on quite a cocktail of homeopathic and Western medicine, but sometimes it's expensive because insurance, going out of network, it's expensive. And doesn't always get covered. So part of that is my concern. And the other thing is, as he grows, he has a low threshold for frustration, so he'll blow up. And right now he's a small kid. He's 9 years old, so I can bear hug him, but he can become violent at times. And so that was a concern we brought to the schools, is we don't want anything to happen to any other kids. And they're just, he's just a little boy, whatever. And we eventually were able to advocate, and they finally listened. And we did have a lawyer at that point, unfortunately, that he would have a one-on-one person to kind of, an aide, I guess, his own aide to kind of, if he's on the school playground and he's starting to show those signs, he's getting too anxious or agitated, they'll kind of take him aside and take him into the special ed room, let him calm down, and then bring him back into the classroom. But he gets anxious at times, and he can become combative. So it is a concern as he gets older. What's that going to look like? Is he going to outgrow it? Sometimes I know ADHD medication can cause aggression. So is that something, is it the medication? There's a lot of factors, but we have an amazing team that are working with him. He's got a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and he's got the school now, working with him, and he's got us as parents. And so I think it takes a village, to raise a special needs child.
Is it a challenge going through your own journey with mental illness? And I think one thing parents do is sometimes they'll think when a child is going through something, oh, I've been there, I know exactly what they're going through. But then knowing your own threshold.
Right.
And you mentioned that, of how much can I handle of this? Would it trigger you, or would there be any effect on you and in your ability to care for him?
Sometimes it does. It is triggering. It can, he's loud and he's hyper, and I tend to like to be quieter, and so it can be triggering. And it's just I have to be self-aware and know my limitations. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned over the years, is to recognize my limitations, and when I need to pull back, what's my plan A, what's my plan B, what's my plan C? Because with kids, you really need a lot of different contingency plans when dealing with certain situations, and I rely heavily on my boyfriend to help support me when they're there, and yeah.
And your tools.
And my tools.
Because it seems like you're really implementing them. Do you think that kids are as receptive to, so you've learned some really nice patterns and some ways to help you. Does he, if you share those tools with him, does he seem receptive to those at all?
He's learning, yeah, like the medication piece, he knows I take medicines and he takes medicines. Of course, he has to take a lot more than I do. Some of it's because it's homeopathic and you have to take those more often. And some of the other stuff, I'll say, oh, that's the same type of pill Mommy takes. And so the medicine part, we've kind of figured out. He doesn't refuse that usually. He's usually pretty good about that. Some of the skills, I think he is still in the process of learning some of those skills. And like I say, he has a low tolerance for frustration.
Right.
And some of that's just the learning disability. But he's learning. He's learning.
That's really interesting that you're both in each other's paths,
Yeah.
all of those things
Right.
come together.
Right.
So I think from here, what I'm going to do is we'll finish tomorrow interviewing Donna.
Okay.
And then I'm going to try to find some of the similarities between the three of you to be able to share. And, all of you have different journeys, and yet there's some similarities in here that are really interesting in terms of access to how you're getting medication or treatment, but how you've built your success for yourselves comes from inside, and that's a great thing to learn, because most of us think it is on the outside, and it's not.
No.
What I'm learning from you guys, and it's really quite beautiful. So I'm going to look for the similarities, and then I might have some follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
And are you comfortable with me sharing your journey as a mother?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's something I'm proud of.
I think
feel
it's beautiful.
very blessed to have gone that direction. And even though I know it's a co-parenting arrangement, I wouldn't have got to this point without my partner at that time. So,
Right.
yeah, definitely.
It's really neat, and just watching and listening to you about how you have been able to, because we can find tools all over the place and read a book and go to, but how you've implemented them and taken them in to how you're living your life is really inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing your journey
Yeah.
with us, and I'm really excited.
I am too.
I think, too, we're going to be able to put together a couple of things, and especially the piece that for NAMI to be able to advocate with, because, again, going back to a year ago, I didn't know what NAMI was.
Exactly. It's like the best kept secret, it seems
Right?
like. It's like, what the heck? This is like a gold mine here. And yeah, trying to get the word out it's weird.
Right. Well, and it creates such a community, and
Yeah.
and an ability to be in a world where you feel normality and not as a complete outsider. And I think,
Right.
my goodness, that's so important
Right.
for any of us. So this is great.
Yeah. It's helped me not live a double life, because I feel like that's kind of what I felt like before. Like I was living like this double life, and I didn't know what it was, and it was just like trying to integrate my mental illness into who I was and what my place in the world was.
And always pretending and wearing like one of this
Yeah.
is called
Yeah.
Unmasked.
Mhm.
You know, and we all wear the mask,
Right.
right? And
Right.
for all these different reasons, and that's a great way of putting it, is the duality that we have to have in life, and especially if you're dealing with something internal that you know can be so uncomfortable.
Right.
Good for you. If Are we still rolling? Are we still rolling? This is a man like Barbara Walters. He doesn't work anymore, apparently. If you could say something about NAMI that has helped or changed your life, is there something that you would like to say or share about that?
Well, yeah, it saved me a lot of money in terms of psychotherapy because now I have peers to support and to rely on. I have that sense of community that you talked about. I have not just friendships, but people I can relate to, and it's helped me integrate into who I am. Like, what is this illness that I have? How does it affect me? What do I do with it? Where do I go from here? And that's part of the mission of NAMI is there's the advocacy. You know, we can make things better for those that are struggling like ourselves or for our family members. It's been a game changer.
And I think one of the symptoms that you spoke about earlier was when you have schizophrenia, it really plays with your ability to trust people.
Right, right.
And I've seen that happen with my sister. And I don't know if I'm misreading you, but I feel a sense of trust, and did when we first met as well,
Yeah.
of your ability to trust the conversation and to be able to be part of a community, which I think is huge.
Right,
So coming to that point in your
Right.
life is great. All of us deal with that.
yeah.
You know, can we
Yeah.
trust?
Exactly.
Can we trust this? How are you going to use
Right.
this? Or what do people
The
have
suspicion,
in? So
yeah.
that it's really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm really happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, one day I'll be as evolved. I don't know.
Because it is a ball.
Maybe it's my next life.
You can be a cat too.
I am. I am going to be a cat. I'm hoping I would be a cat. This is great. Well, thank you, my dear.
Yes.
Do you have any questions for me?
No, just when you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. You're never bothering me.
Okay.
Don't feel like that. I'm excited about this project. I think I'm really excited.
I am too.
I'm going to have my parents there that night, and my boyfriend's going to be there that night. So I've already invited them to the gala. So
Oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Oh,
yeah.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Trying to get that